They said he was nothing, a single father with no degree, no connections, no future in their world of glass towers and seven-figure deals. They were wrong. Lucas Hale didn't just expose the truth that nearly destroyed a billion-dollar company. He became the one thing they never saw coming, indispensable. This is the story of how the man everyone overlooked became the one who saved them all. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Lucas Hale stood in the elevator of Sterling and Cross Technologies, watching the numbers climb toward the 32nd floor. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors. A tired-looking man in a shirt he'd ironed 3 times that morning because the collar wouldn't stay flat. Khakis that were clean but faded at the knees, shoes he'd polished until his daughter Emma asked why he was shining them like church shoes. He wasn't supposed to be here. The resume he'd submitted 2 months ago had been a Hail Mary, the kind of thing you do at 2 in the morning when your daughter's asleep and the bills are spread across the kitchen table like an accusation. He'd listed every odd job, every night course, every scrap of experience he'd managed to collect in 12 years of barely keeping his head above water. He hadn't expected a callback. He definitely hadn't expected an interview. The elevator chimed. 32nd floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought chrome and white leather communicated innovation. A woman behind the desk glanced up, took in his appearance in a single sweep, and her expression shifted into something professionally neutral. "Lucas Hale," he said. "I have a 9:30 with Miss Sterling." "Sign in here." She pushed a tablet across the desk without quite looking at him. "I'll let her know you've arrived." He signed his name with the stylus, his hand steadier than he felt. Through the glass walls behind reception, he could see the bullpen, rows of standing desks, people in clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent, screens everywhere, showing graphs and data that might as well have been written in another language. "Mr. Hale?" He turned. The woman walking toward him was younger than he'd expected, late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional without being severe. She wore a black blazer over a gray blouse, heels that clicked precisely on the polished floor. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "Ava Sterling?" she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming in." Her grip was firm, brief. She turned without waiting for a response, and he followed her through a security door that required a badge tap, down a corridor lined with conference rooms where people gestured at whiteboards and talked rapidly into headsets. "Coffee?" she asked without turning. "I'm fine, thank you." "Good, because our coffee's terrible." She glanced back at him, and there was the faintest hint of something, amusement, assessment, in her expression. "Fair warning." She led him into a conference room that was smaller than he'd expected, less intimidating. A table, 6 chairs, a window overlooking the city stretching out in every direction. She sat, gestured for him to do the same. "So." She opened a folder, his resume, printed, with notes in the margins and handwriting he couldn't read. "Lucas Hale, 12 years in logistics coordination, warehouse management, supply chain oversight, night courses in business analytics and systems management, no formal degree." She looked up. "Why Sterling and Cross?" He'd prepared for this question, practiced it in the mirror while Emma ate her cereal, refined it during the bus ride downtown. But sitting across from Ava Sterling, with her sharp eyes and sharper questions, the rehearsed answer felt hollow. "Because I'm good at seeing how things connect," he said instead. "And I'm tired of working for people who aren't." Her eyebrow lifted. "That's honest." "You asked." "I did." She leaned back, studying him. "You know this position is entry-level, junior analyst on a project team. It's not glamorous. I'm not looking for glamorous. I'm looking for a chance. A chance at what? At something more than watching other people build things while I move their boxes around." The silence stretched between them. Outside, someone laughed, sharp, sudden, cut off by a closing door. "You have a daughter," Ava said, glancing at the resume. "Emma, 7 years old. 8 in November." He kept his voice even. If this was where she decided single father equaled unreliable, He'd know in the next 30 seconds. Custody arrangement? It's just us. Has been for 6 years. That must be difficult. It's life. He met her gaze. She's why I'm here. Why I'm not going to waste your time or mine. Ava closed the folder, folded her hands on top of it. The project we're staffing is the Meridian Initiative, she said. Client-facing platform redesign for one of our biggest accounts. Integrated supply chain management, real-time analytics, predictive modeling. If it works, it's worth $40 million over 3 years. If it doesn't, she paused. Let's just say failure isn't an option. Sounds like pressure. It is. The team's already resistant to bringing in someone without a traditional background. They're going to look for reasons to prove you don't belong. She tilted her head slightly. Why should I fight them on this? This was it. The moment where he either convinced her or walked back to the elevator and the life he'd been trying to escape. Because everyone on that team has the same background, Lucas said. Same schools, same training, same way of thinking. Which means they all have the same blind spots. You need someone who sees things differently. Someone who spent 12 years making broken systems work because that's the only option. He leaned forward slightly. You need someone who can't afford to fail, because I promise you I can't. Ava studied him for what felt like a full minute. Then she stood, extended her hand again. Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. The apartment was dark when Lucas got home, which meant Mrs. Chen from 4B had already dropped Emma off and left. He found his daughter curled on the couch with her math homework spread across the coffee table, the TV playing some cartoon about talking animals on mute. Hey, Bug. He dropped his bag by the door, loosened his tie. Emma looked up, and her face split into a grin that made everything, the years of night shifts, the turned-down jobs, the bills, the fear, worth it. Did you get it? He sat beside her, pulled her into a hug that she tolerated for approximately 5 seconds before squirming away. I start Monday. Yes! She pumped her fist, then immediately looked suspicious. Does that mean we can get pizza tonight? Don't push your luck. But we're celebrating. We're celebrating with pasta. I'll put extra cheese on it. She groaned dramatically, but she was smiling. You're the worst. I know. Homework done? Almost. She made a face at the math worksheet. This one's stupid. He pulled the paper closer, scanned the problem. Long division. Show me what you tried. They worked through it together, Emma arguing with his logic until she suddenly got it, that moment of clarity that made her eyes light up. He watched her scribble the answer, already moving on to the next problem, and felt something tighten in his chest. This job had to work. It had to. Monday arrived with rain that turned the city gray and endless. Lucas dropped Emma at school, watched her run through the downpour with her backpack bouncing, then caught the bus downtown. He arrived at Sterling and Cross at 7:45, signed in with the same receptionist who didn't quite meet his eyes, and was directed to the 28th floor. The Meridian Initiative had its own wing, an open workspace with standing desks arranged in clusters, whiteboards covered in diagrams and timelines, screens everywhere showing code and schematics he didn't fully understand yet. A woman in her 40s with red glasses and an air of permanent irritation looked up as he approached. You're Hale? Lucas, yes. Diane Morris, project lead. She didn't offer her hand. Your desk's there. Login credentials are in the envelope. We have stand-up in 15 minutes, so get settled quickly. She walked away before he could respond. Lucas found the desk she'd indicated, tucked in the corner facing a wall, and the envelope taped to the monitor. Inside, a temporary ID badge, a password on a yellow sticky note, and a stapled packet titled Meridian Initiative, Project Overview, and Team Protocols. He was on page 3 when a voice behind him said, Fresh meat. Lucas turned. The guy standing there was maybe 26, wearing a hoodie that probably cost $200 and an expression of practiced boredom. Connor Yates, the guy said. Senior analyst, which around here means I've survived more than 6 months. He glanced at Lucas's desk, at the overview packet. Let me guess. Ava's charity hire? Excuse me?
Don't take it personally. She does this sometimes. Finds someone with a compelling story and gives them a shot. Usually lasts about a month before they realize they're in over their head. Connor shrugged. Nothing against you, just how it goes. Good to know.
Stand-ups in the conference room. Don't talk unless Diane asks you a direct question, and even then, keep it short. Connor walked away, already pulling out his phone. Lucas sat at his desk, logged into the system with the temporary credentials, and pulled up the Meridian files. The architecture was complex, multiple integrated modules, each handling a different aspect of the supply chain. Inventory management, logistics routing, predictive analytics based on historical data and real-time inputs. On the surface, it looked elegant, clean. But he'd seen enough systems to know that elegant didn't always mean functional. The stand-up meeting was exactly what Connor had described. Diane stood at the head of the table, running through updates with military efficiency. Each team member reported their progress. Connor on front-end integration, a woman named Priya on database optimization, others on modules Lucas didn't yet fully understand. When Diane's gaze landed on him, he straightened. Lucas Hale, junior analyst, starting today. I know who you are. Diane's tone was flat. Your assignment is documentation review, all existing specs for the inventory management module. I want discrepancies flagged by end of week. Understood. Questions? Not yet. Good. Keep it that way until you know what you're talking about. The meeting continued. Lucas took notes. Tried to track the rapid-fire discussion of API endpoints and data flow diagrams and client requirements that seemed to shift every time someone spoke. Across the table, he caught Ava's eye once. She didn't smile, didn't acknowledge him beyond a brief nod. He was on his own. The first week was brutal. Lucas spent 10-hour days reading documentation that was dense, technical, and often contradictory. He flagged discrepancies, compiled them into reports that Diane scanned for 30 seconds before telling him to be more specific. He stayed late, took the bus home after Emma was already asleep, woke up at 5:30 to make her breakfast before Mrs. Chen arrived. By Friday, he had a list of 47 inconsistencies in the inventory module specs alone. He brought them to Diane, who glanced at the first page and sighed. These are minor, version control issues mostly. Some of them affect core functionality, Lucas said. The batch processing logic doesn't match the client requirements from March. The client changed their mind in April. It's handled. The April revision isn't in the main spec document. Diane looked at him then, really looked at him, and her expression was somewhere between irritation and exhaustion. Lucas, I appreciate thoroughness, but we're 3 months into a 9-month timeline. We don't have time to chase down every documentation gap. If the code works, it works. But if the documentation doesn't match the code, then we fix the documentation later. Focus on what matters. She walked away. Lucas stood there with his 47 flags and the growing sense that what matters meant something different to Diane than it did to him. That night, he stayed late anyway. Pulled up the actual code base for the inventory module, compared it line by line to the specs. The discrepancies weren't just documentation gaps. They were logic errors, places where the code made assumptions that the requirements explicitly contradicted. He started a new document, titled it Potential Critical Issues, began documenting everything he found. Well, 3 weeks in, Ava called him into her office. It was smaller than he'd expected for someone with her title, VP of Strategic Initiatives, according to the plaque outside her door, but organized with the same precision as everything else about her. Shelves lined with books on systems theory and management strategy, a whiteboard covered in diagrams, a photo on her desk of her shaking hands with someone Lucas vaguely recognized from the news. Sit, she said, not looking up from her laptop. He sat. She typed for another 30 seconds, then closed the laptop and focused on him. How's it going? Fine. That's not what I asked. She leaned back. I asked how it's going, not what you think I want to hear. Lucas hesitated, then decided honesty had worked once before. I think there are problems no one wants to acknowledge. Such as? He pulled out his phone, opened the document he'd been building. The inventory module has logic gaps that could cause data corruption under specific load conditions. The predictive analytics model is using a training dataset that's 18 months out of date,
which means its forecasts are going to drift from reality the longer the system runs. The integration points between modules assume synchronous processing, but the client's infrastructure is built for asynchronous. Stop. Ava held up a hand. Have you brought this to Diane? She said if the code works, it works. Does the code work? In controlled testing, yes. In production, under real-world conditions with unpredictable load and edge cases? Lucas met her gaze. I don't know, but I think the risk is higher than anyone's admitting. Ava was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, the city glittered, lights coming on as evening settled over the buildings. Lucas, she said finally, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. This company runs on confidence. Client confidence, investor confidence, team confidence. If we start second-guessing every decision, questioning every assumption, we don't just slow down, we stop. And stopping means we lose. What if moving forward means we lose anyway? Then we lose while trying, not while paralyzed by fear. She leaned forward. I appreciate your diligence, truly, but you need to understand the reality here. Diane's been doing this for 15 years. Connor's a prodigy who helped build 3 successful platforms before he turned 25. These people know what they're doing. I'm not saying they don't. You're saying they're missing something, which means either you're right and they're all incompetent, or you're wrong and wasting everyone's time. Her expression softened slightly. I'm not trying to shut you down. I'm trying to help you see how this looks. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to pull up his documentation, walk her through every inconsistency, every risk he'd identified. But he could see it in her eyes. She'd already decided. Understood, he said instead. Good. She opened her laptop again. Keep doing the work you were hired to do. Documentation, support, whatever Diane needs. You're smart, Lucas. Don't waste that trying to fight battles you can't win. He left her office feeling like he'd been dismissed in the gentlest way possible. November came. Emma turned 8, and Lucas took a half day to bring cupcakes to her class, watching her beam as her friend sang off key, and she made a wish he'd probably never know. That night, they had pizza, real pizza, from the place 2 blocks over that she loved. And she told him about her day with the kind of breathless enthusiasm that made him forget, for a little while, about Meridian and Diane and the growing list of problems he couldn't get anyone to take seriously. At work, the project accelerated. Client demos were scheduled for January, which meant December was crunch time. The team worked longer hours, weekends became mandatory, and Lucas found himself juggling Emma's schedule with Mrs. Chen and trying to be present for stand-ups where he was still mostly ignored. But he kept watching, kept tracking. In early December, during a routine data migration test, the inventory module crashed. Not a graceful failure, a hard crash that corrupted the test database and required a full restore. Diane called an emergency meeting, everyone looking exhausted and stressed, and Connor walked them through the issue. Edge case in the batch processor, he said, sounding annoyed. Specific sequence of concurrent writes triggered a race condition. We've patched it. Lucas raised his hand. Diane sighed. What, Lucas? That's the same race condition I flagged in October, he said, in the potential issues document I sent you. The room went quiet. Connor's expression darkened. You flagged a theoretical problem, Connor said. This was a different manifestation. It's the same root cause, asynchronous processing without proper lock management. We have lock management, not for this scenario. Gentlemen? Diane's voice cut through the tension. We don't have time for this. Connor's patched it. We move forward. She looked at Lucas. Unless you have a specific actionable solution? He did. He'd written it up weeks ago. But looking around the table, at Connor's hostility, at Diane's exhaustion, at the rest of the team avoiding his eyes, he knew presenting it now would accomplish nothing. No, he said. Just wanted to note the pattern. Noted. Moving on. The meeting continued. Lucas stopped listening. That night he updated his document, added the crash to the timeline, cross-referenced it with his earlier warnings. The pattern was clear now, at least to him. The system had fundamental architectural problems that no amount of patching would fix.
Every solution was a band-aid, and the problems kept bleeding through. He sent the updated document to Ava. Didn't expect a response. Got one anyway, at 11:30 p.m. We need to talk. Monday morning, 7 a.m. Monday morning, Lucas arrived at 6:45. Ava was already in her office, looking like she hadn't slept. "Close the door," she said. He did. "I read your document, all 63 pages of it." She rubbed her eyes. "Lucas, what do you want me to do with this?" "I want you to take it seriously." "I am taking it seriously. That's the problem." She turned her monitor toward him. On the screen was his document, annotated with her notes. "You're right about most of this. Maybe all of it. The architecture is flawed, the testing is inadequate, the timeline is unrealistic. Then why? Because we're 3 weeks from client demo, Lucas. 3 weeks from a $40 million contract renewal that this company needs to survive. If I go to leadership right now and say we need to halt development and redesign the core system, do you know what happens?" She didn't wait for an answer. "They fire me. They replace me with someone who'll push it through anyway. And Meridian launches on schedule with all the problems you've identified. Except now I'm not here to help fix them when they explode. So we just let it happen? We do our best with what we have. We document the risks, we build in safeguards, and we pray the problems don't surface until after launch, when we have more leverage to address them." She leaned back. "It's not ideal, it's barely acceptable, but it's reality." Lucas stood, walked to her window, looked out at the city waking up below. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. "I took this job because I wanted to build something that mattered, something real, not another system held together with duct tape and hope." "I know, but that's not always how it works." He turned to face her. "Then maybe it should work differently." "Maybe." Ava's expression was unreadable. "But changing how it works means risking everything. Your job, my job, this whole project. Are you prepared for that?" The question hung between them. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the glass towers gold. "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "But I know doing nothing feels worse." Ava studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, as if deciding something. "Go back to work," she said. "Keep documenting, keep watching. And if something breaks, when something breaks, be ready." He left her office, not sure whether he'd been given permission or a warning. December dragged on. The team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and deadline panic. Lucas did his assignments, documented what he could, and watched the system teeter toward launch like a house of cards in a windstorm. Emma noticed his stress, asked him one night over microwaved leftovers if everything was okay. "Just work stuff, Bug," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about." "Are they being mean to you?" "No, just complicated." She considered this, swirling her fork through her mac and cheese. "Mrs. Chen says complicated just means grown-ups don't want to explain." He laughed despite himself. "Mrs. Chen's pretty smart. So explain." He looked at his 8-year-old daughter, her serious eyes, and her absolute faith that he could fix anything, and felt something crack open in his chest. "I found some problems at work," he said. "Big problems. And no one wants to listen." "Why not?" "Because fixing them would be hard and expensive, and they think it's better to just hope nothing goes wrong." Emma frowned. "That's stupid." "Yeah, it kind of is." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." She reached across the table, put her small hand on his. "You'll figure it out. You always do." He held her hand, this tiny person who believed in him more than he believed in himself, and made a decision. What? The client demo was scheduled for January 15th. By January 10th, the system was still showing errors in staging that the team was frantically trying to resolve. Lucas watched from the sidelines, documenting each failure, each patch, each moment where the cracks showed through. On January 12th, Diane called a team meeting. She looked worse than Lucas had ever seen her, pale, drawn, running on fumes. "We're pushing the demo," she announced. 2 weeks. Clients agreed to January 29th. Relief swept the room. 2 more weeks meant time to fix the staging issues, time to polish, time to pretend everything was under control. Lucas raised his hand. "Not now, Lucas," Diane said. 2 weeks won't fix the core problems. It'll fix the problems we need to fix for demo, but not for production, not for long-term stability. Diane's expression hardened. "Unless you have a solution that can be implemented in 2 weeks, I don't want to hear it." "I have a solution. I've had one since October. It requires rebuilding the integration layer and redesigning the data flow, which would take 6 months minimum." "Then it's not a solution, is it?" Diane's voice was sharp. "It's a fantasy. We work with what we have, Lucas. That's how this works. Even if what we have is going to fail." The room went silent. Connor was staring at him like he'd lost his mind. Priya looked uncomfortable. The others just looked away. Diane stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "If you can't be part of the solution, Lucas, maybe you shouldn't be part of the team." It was a threat. A clear one. Lucas met her gaze, thought about Emma, about the bills, about everything he'd risked to be here. Then he thought about watching this thing collapse and knowing he'd said nothing. "Maybe I shouldn't," he said quietly. He walked out. The hallway was empty, quiet. He made it to the elevator before his hand started shaking, rode down to the lobby, walked out into the January cold without his coat. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. "My office. Now." He almost didn't go back, almost kept walking, caught the bus, went home to Emma and pretended this job had never happened. Instead, he turned around. Ava's office door was open. She stood by her window, arms crossed. "That was stupid," she said without preamble. "Probably. Diane wants you gone, like she's already talking to HR. I figured I can protect you, for now. But you need to give me something to work with." Lucas pulled out his phone, opened his documentation. "Every failure, every risk, every warning I've given that's been ignored. It's all here. Time-stamped, cross-referenced, with the code to prove it." Ava took the phone, scrolled through page after page. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. "This is comprehensive," she said finally. "It's the truth." "Truth doesn't always win, Lucas." "No, but it's all I have." She handed back his phone, looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "The demo is January 29th, she said. "If we make it through without incident, this conversation never happened. You keep your job, Diane gets her promotion, everyone wins. And if we don't make it through, then we'll need this documentation, and someone brave enough to present it." She walked past him, paused at the door. "Go home, Lucas. Get some rest. This isn't over yet." He went home. Emma was already asleep. He sat in the dark living room, his documentation open on his phone, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Wondered if doing the right thing was worth losing everything. Wondered if he'd even know the right thing when the moment came. Outside, the city hummed on, indifferent to one man's crisis of conscience. The demo was 17 days away. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the room next door, his mind running through scenarios that all ended badly. By 5 a.m., he gave up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, going through his documentation one more time. The numbers didn't lie. The system was unstable, and in 17 days, they were going to put it in front of a client who trusted them. Emma shuffled out at 6:30, her hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. "You look terrible," she said, climbing into the chair across from him. "Good morning to you, too." "Seriously, Dad, did you even sleep?" "A little." He closed the laptop. "Cereal or toast?" "Both. And you didn't sleep at all, I can tell." She was too observant for 8. He got up, pulled out the cereal, dropped bread in the toaster. Emma watched him with the kind of worried expression that no kid should have to wear. "Is work getting worse?" she asked. "It's complicated. Mrs. Chen says—" "I know what Mrs. Chen says." He poured milk over her cereal, set it in front of her. "And yeah, it's complicated, but I'm handling it." "How?" That was the question. He buttered her toast, cut it diagonally the way she liked, bought himself time to think of an answer that wasn't a lie.
By doing what I think is right, he said finally, even when it's hard. Emma considered this, crunching her cereal.
Like when I told Mrs. Patterson that Chelsea was cheating on the spelling test? Kind of like that. Chelsea stopped being my friend after. I know, Bug, but it was still the right thing. Yeah, it was. She nodded, satisfied with this logic in the way only a kid could be. Then you should keep doing it, even if people get mad. He wished it were that simple. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. Lucas stared out the window at the city passing by. People rushing to jobs they probably hated, buildings full of compromises and quiet desperation. When had he become one of them? He arrived at Sterling and Cross at 7:40, half expecting security to stop him, HR waiting with a termination letter. Instead, the lobby was normal. The receptionist barely glanced up. He rode the elevator to 28, walked into the Meridian workspace, and found his desk exactly as he'd left it. Connor was already there, headphones on, typing furiously. He didn't look up as Lucas passed. Lucas logged in, pulled up his email. Nothing from HR, nothing from Diane. One message from Ava sent at 6 a.m. Conference room C, 8:30, be there. He spent the next hour pretending to review documentation while actually watching the team filter in. Priya arrived with coffee and dark circles under her eyes. Two developers he barely knew set up at their desks,
already deep in conversation about API endpoints. Diane came in at 8:15, moving like someone held together by willpower and spite. She glanced at Lucas once. Her expression was unreadable. At 8:25, Lucas headed to conference room C. It was one of the smaller ones, tucked away from the main bullpen. When he opened the door, Ava was already there, along with someone he didn't recognize. A man in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of presence that said executive without needing a title. Lucas Hale, Ava said. This is Richard Cross, co-founder and CEO. Lucas's stomach dropped. He shook the offered hand, managed something that probably sounded like a greeting. Sit, Cross said. His voice was measured, controlled. Ava's been telling me you have concerns about Meridian. This was it. Either he backed down or committed fully. There was no middle ground left. Yes, sir, Lucas said. Significant concerns. Walk me through them. So he did. Started with the architecture, the asynchronous processing issues, the race conditions that kept surfacing in different forms. Moved to the testing gaps, the outdated training data for the predictive model, the integration points that assumed infrastructure the client didn't have. He pulled up his documentation on his phone, showed Cross the timeline of warnings, and ignored flags and patches that didn't address root causes. He talked for 20 minutes straight. Cross didn't interrupt once. When Lucas finally stopped, the silence in the room was heavy. This is thorough, Cross said finally, almost obsessively so. I'm detail-oriented. You're catastrophizing. Connor's voice cut in from the doorway. Lucas turned. Connor stood there with Diane behind him, both looking like they'd been summoned. Making mountains out of molehills because you don't understand how enterprise systems actually work. I understand that enterprise systems fail when fundamental architecture is flawed, Lucas said evenly. The architecture is fine. You're just too inexperienced to… Connor. Cross's voice was quiet, but it shut Connor down immediately. I didn't ask for your assessment, yet. He turned to Diane. You've been leading this project. What's your take? Diane stepped forward, and Lucas could see the calculation in her eyes. She was choosing between defending her team's work and acknowledging the problems Lucas had identified. Lucas has raised valid technical questions, she said carefully. But context matters. We're building to specification, on timeline, within budget. Every system has risks. Our job is to manage them, not let them paralyze development. Has he brought these concerns to you before? Multiple times. I've addressed each one based on priority and resources available. By ignoring them, Lucas said. By triaging them, Diane shot back, which is my job as project lead. We can't chase every theoretical edge case. They're not theoretical when they've already caused crashes. One crash, in staging, which we fixed.
with a patch that doesn't address the underlying chess. Enough. Cross raised a hand. Ava, where do you stand on this? Ava had been quiet, watching the exchange. Now she leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral.
I think Lucas has identified real risks, she said. I also think Diane's right that we can't redesign the entire system 3 weeks from demo. The question is whether we can mitigate enough to proceed safely or whether we need to delay. Delay is not an option, Cross said flatly. The client's already given us one extension. Another one and we lose credibility we can't afford to lose. He looked at Lucas. You seem like someone who doesn't raise alarms lightly. So tell me, in your professional judgment, will this system hold up through the demo? Lucas thought about Emma, about the bills, about everything riding on this job. Thought about the safe answer, the political answer, the answer that would let him keep his head down and his paycheck coming. No, sir, he said. I don't think it will. The room went still. Connor looked furious. Diane's face was stone. Cross studied Lucas for a long moment. Then he turned to Ava. I want independent verification. Bring in an outside audit team. Have them review Lucas's documentation and the current code base. I want their assessment by end of week. Richard, that's going to cost, Diane started. I don't care what it costs. If we're about to walk into a demo with a system that's going to fail, I need to know now, not after we've embarrassed ourselves in front of the client. He stood. Ava, coordinate the audit. Diane, full cooperation. Lucas, you're off other assignments until this is resolved. I want you available to the audit team. Cross walked out. The silence he left behind was toxic. Diane turned to Lucas, her voice shaking with controlled rage. You just torpedoed 3 months of work. I documented 3 months of problems you refused to fix. You documented your own paranoia, and now we're going to waste a week and God knows how much money proving you wrong. She stepped closer. When this audit comes back clean, you're done here. I'll make sure of it. She left. Connor followed, shooting Lucas a look that promised retribution. Ava remained seated, rubbing her temples. That went well, Lucas said. Did it? She looked up at him. You just made an enemy of one of the most influential project leads in this company. If the audit doesn't back you up, your career here is over. If the audit doesn't back me up, I was wrong. And I'd rather be wrong than watch this thing collapse. Noble, stupid, but noble. She sighed. The audit team arrives Monday. You have the weekend to prepare whatever evidence you think they need to see. Make it count. Lucas spent the rest of Friday organizing his documentation into a format that would make sense to outside auditors. He cross-referenced every claim with code samples, test results, and the timeline of warnings he'd submitted. By 6 p.m., his eyes were burning and his back ached from sitting too long. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mrs. Chen says you're working late again. Pizza? He smiled despite everything. Home by 7. Pizza it is. He made it by 7:15. Emma had already ordered pepperoni and mushroom, his favorite, which meant she was worried about him. They ate on the couch watching some animated movie about dragons that he couldn't follow because his mind kept running through Monday's audit. Dad? He looked down. Emma was studying him with her serious face. Yeah, Bug? Are you going to lose your job? The question hit harder than it should have. What makes you think that? You've been stressed for weeks, and you keep working late, and you look sad even when you're smiling. 8 years old, and she saw right through him. I might, he admitted. I did something at work that some people didn't like, but I think it was the right thing. Like me and Chelsea. Yeah, like you and Chelsea. Emma leaned against him, her small warmth solid and real. If you lose this job, will we be okay? We'll be okay. We always are. Promise? He wrapped his arm around her. Promise. She seemed satisfied with this. They finished the movie in silence, Emma eventually falling asleep against his shoulder. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in her doorway watching her sleep the way he'd done 1,000 times before. Whatever happened Monday, he'd make sure she was okay. That was the only thing that mattered.
The weekend dragged. Lucas cleaned the apartment, took Emma to the park, helped her with homework, all while his mind circled back to the audit. He reviewed his documentation until he could recite it from memory, found 2 more inconsistencies he'd missed before, wondered if he was actually helping or just digging himself deeper. Sunday night, he got an email from Ava. Audit team briefing Monday, 9 a.m. Conference room A. Bring everything. He arrived at 8:30 Monday morning with his laptop, 2 USB drives with backup documentation, and the kind of nervous energy that made his hands shake when he tried to hold his coffee. Conference room A was larger than C, with a table that could seat 20 and windows overlooking the city. The audit team was already there. 3 people in business casual, laptops open, professional detachment on their faces. Ava sat at the head of the table. Diane and Connor occupied one side, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Lucas Hale," Ava said. "Meet the audit team. Samantha Reed, lead technical auditor. Marcus Wong, systems architect. Jennifer Blake, quality assurance specialist." Lucas shook hands, tried not to look as nervous as he felt. "We've reviewed your initial documentation," Samantha said. She was maybe 40, with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Impressive detail. Now we need to verify your claims against the actual codebase. Walk us through your primary concerns." He did. Started with the inventory module race conditions, demonstrated how specific concurrent operations could trigger data corruption, showed them the test results that proved it, the patches that addressed symptoms without fixing the root cause. Marcus stopped him 15 minutes in. "Can you show us the actual code?" Lucas pulled it up. Walked them through the logic, line by line, showing exactly where the assumptions broke down under stress. Connor interrupted. "That scenario requires specific timing that's statistically unlikely in production." "Unlikely isn't impossible," Lucas said. "And when you're processing millions of transactions, unlikely becomes inevitable." "Show me a production failure," Connor challenged. "We haven't launched yet, that's the point." "So you're speculating?" "I'm extrapolating from staging failures and known architecture weaknesses." Lucas turned to the audit team. "The December crash was this exact issue. Same root cause, different trigger. Connor patched the trigger, not the cause." Samantha made a note. "We'll need access to the staging environment and crash logs." "Already compiled," Lucas said, handing over a USB drive. "Time-stamped, cross-referenced with relevant code commits." The morning bled into afternoon. Lucas walked the audit team through each concern. The predictive model's stale training data, the integration assumptions that didn't match client infrastructure, the testing gaps that left whole categories of edge cases unexplored. Diane and Connor pushed back on everything, providing context and justification, painting Lucas as someone who didn't understand the necessary compromises of real-world development. By 3 p.m., Lucas's throat was raw from talking and his confidence was starting to crack. The audit team's expressions were professionally neutral, giving nothing away. "We'll need the rest of the week for detailed analysis," Samantha said finally. "Full access to all environments, documentation, and team members for interviews." "You'll have it," Ava said. Diane stood. "How soon will we know the results?" "Friday afternoon. We'll present findings to Mr. Cross and relevant stakeholders." "And the demo?" "That's a business decision based on our technical assessment." Samantha closed her laptop. "We'll be in touch if we need anything else from you, Lucas." The audit team filed out. Connor left without a word. Diane paused at the door, looked back at Lucas. "This better be worth it," she said quietly. Then he was alone with Ava. "You did well," she said. "I couldn't tell if they believed me. That's their job, professional skepticism. But you presented your case clearly. Now we wait." "And if they side with Diane?" Ava was quiet for a moment. "Then we proceed with the demo and hope you're wrong." The rest of the week was strange. Lucas was technically still employed but had no assigned tasks. The audit team worked behind closed doors, occasionally pulling in team members for interviews. Lucas saw Connor go in Tuesday afternoon, come out an hour later looking stormy. Diane spent Wednesday morning with them and emerged looking exhausted. Lucas spent his days at his desk, pretending to review documentation while actually refreshing his email every 10 minutes, waiting for something, anything. Emma noticed. Asked him Thursday night over reheated pasta if he was okay. Just waiting to hear about something at work, he said.
Good news or bad news? Don't know yet. Could go either way. I hope it's good news. She twirled spaghetti around her fork. You deserve good news. He wished the world worked that way, where deserving something meant getting it, but he'd learned a long time ago that the universe didn't care about fair. Friday arrived like a held breath. Lucas got to the office early, watched the audit team arrive at 8, disappear into conference room A with Ava and Richard Cross. The door closed.
He waited. 9 a.m. came and went. 10. 11. At noon, his phone buzzed. Ava. Conference room A, now. His legs felt unsteady walking down the hallway. He opened the door to find Cross at the head of the table, the audit team on one side, Ava on the other. Diane and Connor were already there, seated opposite each other. Sit, Cross said. Lucas sat. Samantha opened her laptop, pulled up a presentation. We've completed our technical audit of the Meridian Initiative. Our findings are comprehensive, but I'll summarize the key points. She clicked to the first slide. Lucas's stomach tightened. Lucas Hale's documentation identified 47 distinct technical concerns across 6 system modules. We were able to verify 39 of those concerns as legitimate architectural or implementation issues. The remaining 8 were either addressed in recent commits or fell within acceptable risk parameters. Diane's face went pale. Connor stared at the table. Of the 39 verified issues, Samantha continued, we categorized 12 as critical, meaning they pose significant risk of system failure under production load conditions. 17 as high priority, requiring resolution before launch. 10 as medium priority, addressable in post-launch iterations. She clicked to the next slide, a chart showing system stability projections. Based on current architecture and the identified issues, we estimate a 73% probability of significant system failure within the first 3 months of production deployment. This failure could range from data corruption to complete service outages, depending on which vulnerabilities are triggered. The room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Jesus, Cross said quietly. We've prepared detailed remediation recommendations, Marcus added. The good news is most of the critical issues are fixable. The bad news is comprehensive fixes require approximately 4 to 6 months of development time, including redesign of the core integration layer and substantial refactoring of the data processing pipeline. Cross looked at Diane. How did we get here? We were building to spec, Diane said, her voice tight. Managing risks within timeline and budget constraints. These are judgment calls that... These are fundamental architectural failures, Samantha interrupted. Not judgment calls. The inventory module race condition alone has crashed twice in staging and would likely crash within days of production deployment. The predictive model is using a training dataset from 2 years ago, which means its forecasts are essentially random noise dressed up as analytics. The integration layer assumes synchronous processing in an environment built for async, which creates bottlenecks and failure cascades. She looked at Diane with something that wasn't quite judgment, but was definitely not sympathy. Someone on your team identified all of this months ago, Samantha said, and from the documentation trail, it appears those concerns were systematically dismissed. Diane said nothing. Connor still wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Cross turned to Lucas. You've been here, 3 months? 4 months next week. 4 months. And you saw what 15-year veterans missed. It wasn't quite a question. I saw what I was trained to see, Lucas said. 12 years making broken systems work teaches you where they break. Cross leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Ava. What's your recommendation? We postponed the demo, Ava said without hesitation. 6 months minimum. Use that time to implement the audit team's recommendations, rebuild the integration layer, address the critical issues. It's the only way to deliver something that won't destroy our reputation. The client will walk. Maybe, or maybe we're honest with them. Show them the audit results, Explain we found critical flaws and chose to fix them rather than hide them. That's the kind of integrity that builds long-term partnerships, or kills them immediately. Cross rubbed his face. Richard, what happens if we proceed as planned? You get through the demo, Samantha said. The controlled environment will likely hold, but within weeks of production launch, you'll start seeing failures. Data corruption, processing errors, system crashes, and when the client investigates why, they'll find all of this, she gestured at her laptop, was known before launch and ignored. That's not just lost business. That's lawsuit territory. Cross was quiet for a long moment. The weight of the decision filled the room like pressure before a storm. Diane, he said finally, you're off Meridian effective immediately. We'll discuss your future with the company separately. Diane stood, her face blank with shock. Richard, you had information that should have halted development and you buried it. Whether that was incompetence or negligence, I don't care. You're done. He looked at Connor. You too. Clear your desks by end of day. Connor's head snapped up. You're firing us? I'm firing the people who nearly destroyed a $40 million contract through willful blindness. Cross's voice was cold. Be grateful I'm not pursuing legal action for negligence. Diane and Connor left without another word. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Cross turned to Ava. You're now lead on Meridian. Get me a revised timeline and budget by Monday. I want the audit team's recommendations implemented in full. Understood. And Lucas. Cross looked at him directly. How would you like a promotion? Lucas blinked. Sir? Senior analyst, double your current salary. Your job is to work with Ava and the new team to rebuild Meridian the right way. No more patches, no more compromises. We build it right, or we don't build it at all. He paused. Interested? Lucas thought about Emma, about the bills that had kept him up nights, about the bus rides and the worn shoes and the years of being overlooked. Yes, sir, he said, very interested. Good. Start Monday. Cross stood, gathered his things. Ava, a word. They left together. Samantha and her team began packing up their laptops. Impressive work, Marcus said to Lucas. Not many junior analysts would have the guts to push this hard. I didn't have much choice. Everyone has a choice. You chose integrity over politics. That's rare. He handed Lucas a business card. If you ever want to move into consulting, give me a call. We need people who actually give a damn. Lucas took the card, still trying to process what had just happened. 10 minutes ago, his job had been hanging by a thread. Now he was senior analyst with double his salary and a mandate to fix what everyone else had broken. He walked back to his desk in a daze. His phone buzzed. Ava. My office. 5 minutes. When he got there, she was standing by her window, looking out at the city. You know this is going to be brutal, right? So she said without turning. 6 months of 16-hour days, rebuilding everything from the ground up. The whole company watching to see if we can pull it off. I know. And you're still in? I'm in. She turned to face him. Why? You could have kept your head down, collected your paycheck, let someone else fix this mess. Lucas thought about Emma's question, are you going to lose your job? Thought about his answer, we'll be okay, we always are. Because someone has to care, he said, and apparently that's me. Ava smiled, small but genuine. Then let's get to work. Lucas told Emma about the promotion that night over takeout Chinese food she'd requested to celebrate. She didn't fully understand what senior analyst meant, but she understood the salary increase well enough to ask if they could finally get the good internet package. Maybe, he said, watching her demolish lo mein with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. Let's see how the first paycheck looks. Does this mean you won't be so stressed anymore? He thought about the 6-month timeline, the complete system rebuild, the entire company watching to see if he and Ava could pull off what Diane's team had failed to do. Different kind of stress, he said. But good stress? Yeah, Bug, good stress. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Lucas wished he was. Monday morning arrived with the weight of new responsibility. Lucas's desk had been moved from the corner to a position near the windows. adjacent to where Ava had set up a temporary workspace for the Meridian rebuild. The old team had scattered, some reassigned to other projects. Others let go in the weekend purge that followed Diane and Connor's termination. The new team assembled at 8 a.m. Ava had pulled people from across the company, handpicked for specific skills. There was Marcus Chen, a systems architect who'd been quietly pushing for better practices for years. Sarah Kim, a senior developer with a reputation for brutal honesty and cleaner code than anyone else in the building. 2 junior developers fresh out of college, hungry and uncontaminated by the company's bad habits. And Lucas, the single father with no degree who'd somehow become responsible for fixing a multi-million-dollar disaster. "All right," Ava said, standing at the whiteboard in their new dedicated workspace. "Everyone's seen the audit report. We have 6 months to rebuild Meridian from the ground up. Not patch it, not polish it, rebuild it. Questions before we start?" Sarah raised her hand. "What's our actual deadline flexibility? Because 6 months for a complete architecture redesign is aggressive even with a perfect team." "Zero flexibility," Ava said. "Richards promised the client a July launch. We hit that date or the contract walks." "Fantastic," Marcus muttered. "No pressure." "Oh, there's pressure," Ava said. "The entire executive team is watching this project. Half of them think Richard made a mistake promoting Lucas and putting me in charge. They're waiting for us to fail so they can say I told you so and go back to the old way of doing things." She let that sink in. "So here's how this works," she continued. "We do this right. No shortcuts, no compromises, no pretending problems don't exist because they're inconvenient. Lucas nearly got fired for refusing to ignore critical flaws. I'm not about to prove him wrong by repeating Diane's mistakes." One of the junior developers, a kid named Tyler with nervous energy and too much coffee, spoke up. "What if we can't do it in 6 months? What if doing it right takes longer?" "Then we communicate that early and clearly," Ava said. "We don't hide problems until they explode. We document, we escalate, we give leadership the information they need to make informed decisions." She looked at Lucas. "Right?" "Right," he said, still getting used to being the person people look to for answers. They spent the first week in planning hell. Lucas and Marcus led the architecture redesign, stripping Meridian down to its core requirements and rebuilding the structure from scratch. They whiteboarded data flows until Lucas's hand cramped from holding markers. They argued about synchronous versus asynchronous processing, about database schemas and API contracts, about every technical decision that Diane's team had made wrong. Sarah challenged everything. Every assumption, every design choice, every line of specification got interrogated until it either held up under scrutiny or got revised. "Why are we using REST here instead of GraphQL?" she asked on Wednesday, pointing at a section of the API design. "Because the client's existing systems integrate better with REST," Marcus said. "Have we verified that? Or are we assuming?" Marcus paused. "Assuming, based on what Diane's team documented." "And we trust Diane's team's documentation. Why exactly?" "Fair point." Lucas made a note to verify with the client directly. The days blurred together. Lucas arrived at 7, left at 8 or 9, caught the bus home to find Emma already asleep more often than not. Mrs. Chen had agreed to extend her hours for extra pay, which helped with the guilt, but didn't eliminate it. He'd leave notes for Emma in the morning, little drawings, jokes, reminders that he loved her, and find her responses when he got home. Stick figures and hearts and "I miss you, Dad" in her careful handwriting. It was the kind of schedule that wasn't sustainable long term. Lucas knew it, but for 6 months, for this project, he'd make it work. 3 weeks in, they hit their first major roadblock. The integration layer redesign required cooperation from the client's IT team to understand their infrastructure constraints. Lucas sent the request through official channels and got back radio silence. "They're not responding," he told Ava in her office late one Thursday. "I've sent 3 emails, left 2 voicemails. Nothing." "Because they don't know who you are," Ava said. "To them, you're just another Sterling and Cross analyst asking for time they don't have." She picked up her phone. "Let me handle this." She made 2 calls. The first to someone named Patricia, who apparently owed her a favor. The second to the client's CTO directly. Lucas listened to her navigate the conversation with a combination of charm and politely framed leverage, mentioning the audit, the commitment to getting things right, the importance of their partnership. Friday afternoon, she said, hanging up. You and Marcus have a video call with their infrastructure team. Come prepared with specific questions. How did you do that? Relationships matter in this business. You can have the best technical skills in the world, but if you can't navigate politics and build alliances, you're limited. She studied him. That's going to be your biggest challenge as you move up. The technical work you're good at. The people work takes practice. Lucas thought about Diane, about Connor, about all the times his lack of political savvy had nearly gotten him fired. Any advice? He asked. Be honest, but not brutal. Build credibility through delivery, not promises. And remember that most people aren't actively trying to sabotage you. They're just trying to protect themselves. She paused. Also, learn when to fight and when to let things go. You nearly got yourself fired fighting battles that could have waited. Sometimes tactical retreat is the smart move. I don't know how to do tactical retreat. I noticed. We'll work on it. The call with the client's infrastructure team was illuminating and frustrating in equal measure. Their systems were more complex than Diane's documentation had indicated, with legacy dependencies that required creative solutions. Lucas took notes furiously while Marcus asked technical questions that revealed gaps in their current design. This is going to require significant rework, Marcus said after they hung up. How significant? 2 weeks minimum, maybe 3. They didn't have 3 weeks to spare. Lucas pulled up the project timeline, started moving pieces around, looking for slack that didn't exist. We can parallelize some of this work, he said slowly. If Sarah's team handles the database refactoring while we redesign the integration layer, we can compress the timeline. That's risky. If either team hits a blocker, the other one can't proceed. I know, but we don't have a choice, Marcus sighed. This is going to be a long 6 months.
Yeah, it is. They presented the revised timeline to Ava the next morning. She studied it, asked pointed questions about dependencies and risks, then approved it with a warning. If this slips, we're in trouble. No more buffer in the schedule. Understood, Lucas said. And Lucas, you need to start delegating more. You're still trying to personally verify every technical decision. That doesn't scale. I'm just trying to make sure we don't miss anything. I know, but you hired good people. Trust them to do their jobs. It was sound advice that Lucas struggled to follow. He'd spent so long being the only person who cared about the details that letting go felt like inviting disaster. But Ava was right. He couldn't personally review every line of code, verify every specification, validate every design choice. So he tried. Gave Sarah full authority over the database architecture, let Marcus own the integration layer design, stepped back from the daily code reviews and focused on the bigger picture, keeping the project on track, identifying blockers before they became crises, making sure all the pieces fit together. It was harder than he expected. February became March. The weather warmed slightly, and Emma started softball season. Lucas missed her first practice, made it to her second game but had to leave early for a client call. She said she understood, but he could see the disappointment in her 8-year-old eyes. I'm sorry, Bug, he said in the car afterward. It's okay. Your job's important. You're more important. I know. She was quiet for a moment. Are you going to miss the whole season? The question hurt because he didn't have a good answer. I'm going to try my best to be there, he said, but there might be some games I can't make. Is that okay? She shrugged, looking out the window. I guess. That night, after she was asleep, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his calendar and the softball schedule. He blocked out her Saturday games, marked them as untouchable. If the project needed him, they'd have to work around it. Ava wasn't thrilled when he told her the next morning. Lucas, we're in the critical phase. Saturdays might be the only time we can do extended testing without impacting weekday development. Then we test on Sundays or weekday evenings. But Saturdays are Emma's. She studied him for a long moment. You're going to have to make sacrifices if you want to keep advancing in this career. I've been making sacrifices for 4 months. I'll make more, but not this one. All right, she said finally. Saturdays are yours,
But this can't become a pattern of drawing boundaries after we've already committed to a timeline. It won't. It was a promise he hoped he could keep. March brought new problems. The integration layer redesign revealed conflicts with other Sterling and Cross systems that no one had documented. The database refactoring uncovered performance issues that required optimizing queries Sarah's team had already written. And the predictive model, the piece Lucas had flagged as using stale data, turned out to be even worse than he'd thought. The training dataset isn't just old, Tyler said, looking pale as he presented his findings to the team. It's corrupted. Someone merged two different data sources without cleaning them, so we've got duplicate entries, mismatched timestamps, and about 15% of the records are just garbage. How did this pass code review? Sarah demanded. It didn't. There was no code review. Connor wrote this whole module solo and checked it in without peer validation. The room went quiet. Lucas felt a familiar anger building, the kind that came from discovering problems that shouldn't exist, that only existed because someone had cut corners they shouldn't have cut. Can we fix it? Ava asked. We need a new training dataset, Tyler said, which means going back to the client for historical data, cleaning it properly, retraining the model from scratch. Timeline impact? 3 weeks, maybe 4. They didn't have 4 weeks. Lucas pulled up the schedule again, looking for something to cut, some corner to trim without compromising the work. There wasn't one. We're going to miss the deadline, Marcus said quietly. No, we're not, Ava said. Not yet. Give me until Monday. I'm going to talk to Richard, see if we can get additional resources. She did. Brought in 2 more developers and a data scientist on temporary assignment from another project. It helped, but it also created new coordination overhead. More people meant more communication, more chances for wires to cross, more complexity. Lucas found himself in meetings that used to be unnecessary. Daily stand-ups stretched to an hour. Code reviews required 3 people instead of 1. Every decision needed consensus, which meant every decision took longer. He mentioned it to Ava after a particularly frustrating stand-up where they'd spent 40 minutes debating database indexing strategies. This is what scaling feels like, she said. More people, more process, more overhead. It's unavoidable past a certain team size. It's slowing us down. In the short term, yes. In the long term, it prevents the kind of cowboy coding that got us into this mess. She paused. You're doing good work, Lucas, but you need to zoom out sometimes. See the forest, not just the trees. He was trying, but the trees kept catching fire. April arrived with cherry blossoms and mounting pressure. They were 6 weeks from the July deadline and still finding problems. Small ones mostly, edge cases and error handling, UI inconsistencies, performance issues under specific load conditions. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to keep everyone working nights and weekends despite Lucas's Saturday boundary. Emma noticed, asked him one night why he looked so tired all the time. Just a lot of work, Bug, he said. Is it almost done? 2 more months. She was quiet, pushing food around her plate. After it's done, will you be less busy? I hope so. You always say that. She wasn't wrong. He'd been saying it for months and it hadn't gotten better. If anything, the pressure had increased. I'm sorry, he said. I know this has been hard. I just miss you. Her voice was small. Even when you're here, you're thinking about work. That hurt because it was true. He was always half present, part of his mind running through code logic and integration patterns, even while she told him about school or showed him drawings. He put down his fork, gave her his full attention. Tell me about your day. Everything. And I promise I'll actually listen. She did. Talked about her science project on volcanoes, about the girl in her class who'd been mean during recess, about the book she was reading that had a talking cat in it. Lucas listened, really listened, and for 20 minutes the project didn't exist. It wasn't enough. But it was something. The first week of May brought disaster, not the catastrophic system failure Lucas had warned about. They'd prevented that. This was different, more insidious. Sarah discovered it during a routine integration test. The new predictive model was producing results that looked reasonable on the surface, but were actually nonsense. The algorithms were correct, the data was clean, but somewhere in the retraining process, the model had learned the wrong patterns. It's overfitted to the training data. The data scientist, a woman named Rebecca, explained in an emergency meeting, which means it performs beautifully on historical data and terribly on anything new. How did we not catch this sooner? Ava asked, and there was an edge to her voice Lucas hadn't heard before. Because our validation approach was flawed, Rebecca admitted. We tested against a subset of the same data set we used for training. It's a rookie mistake, and I should have known better. Can we fix it? Yes, but it requires retraining with a proper train test split,
which means another 2 weeks. Ava closed her eyes. We're 8 weeks from launch. I know. This is exactly the kind of problem we were supposed to avoid. I know, Rebecca said again, and Lucas could hear the shame in her voice. The room fell into heavy silence. Lucas looked at the timeline on the screen, at the narrow window of remaining schedule, and did the math. They could absorb 2 weeks if everything else went perfectly, but nothing ever went perfectly. We tell Richard, he said. Everyone turned to look at him. We tell him now before it becomes a crisis, Lucas continued. Show him what we found, explain the fix, present the timeline impact, give him the information he needs to make a decision about the deadline. He's going to lose it, Marcus said. Maybe, but finding out 2 weeks before launch would be worse. Lucas looked at Ava. You said we document, we escalate, we don't hide problems. This is a problem. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Lucas is right. I'll schedule a meeting with Richard for tomorrow morning. Rebecca, prepare a technical briefing on what went wrong and how we fix it. Lucas, timeline impact analysis. Everyone else, keep working. We're not giving up yet. The meeting with Richard Cross was every bit as unpleasant as Lucas expected. They laid out the problem, the solution, the timeline impact. Richard listened with an expression that gave nothing away until they finished. Then he said, So we're going to miss the July deadline. Not necessarily, Ava said. If we get the model retrained in 2 weeks and nothing else breaks, we can still make it. And if something else breaks, then we'll be in trouble. Richard was quiet, his fingers drumming on the conference table. Lucas watched him process the information, weighing options that all had downsides. The client's already skeptical after we delayed once, Richard said finally. Another delay might kill the contract entirely. Launching with a broken predictive model will definitely kill it, Lucas said, and probably trigger legal action when they realize we sold them garbage. Richard's gaze snapped to him. That's a hell of an accusation. It's the truth. The model in its current state is worse than useless. It's actively misleading. Any business decisions based on its forecasts would be built on false data. And you're certain of this? Yes, sir. I've reviewed Rebecca's analysis. The math doesn't lie. Another long silence. Then Richard sighed. Fix it, he said. Do whatever it takes. But I want daily updates on progress. And if this timeline slips even one more day, I want to know immediately. Understood? Understood, Ava said. They filed out. Lucas's hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation. Ava pulled him aside in the hallway. That was risky, she said quietly. Telling Richard we'd be selling garbage. Was I wrong? No, but there are ways to say things that don't make executives feel like you're accusing them of fraud. I wasn't accusing... I know, but he heard it that way. She rubbed her temples. You need to work on your delivery, Lucas. The content of what you say is usually right. The way you say it sometimes creates unnecessary enemies. He wanted to argue, but knew she had a point. He'd been so focused on technical accuracy that he'd forgotten diplomacy mattered too. I'll work on it, he said. Good, because we're running out of allies who'll tolerate brutal honesty. The next 2 weeks were brutal in a different way. Rebecca worked around the clock retraining the model, validating results, testing edge cases. Lucas coordinated with the rest of the team to keep other work moving forward while the model retrained. They ran parallel testing streams, compressed schedules, worked weekends. Lucas broke his Saturday rule once for an emergency integration test that couldn't be rescheduled. Emma didn't say anything when he told her he'd miss her game, but her silence was worse than complaints. I'm sorry, he said. You're always sorry, she said quietly. But you still miss stuff. He didn't have an answer for that. The model retraining finished on schedule.
Rebecca's validation test showed it was working correctly this time, generalizing properly to new data, producing forecasts that matched reality within acceptable margins. "We're good," she told the team, and the relief in the room was palpable. They were 6 weeks from launch. Still behind schedule, still stressed, but back on track. Maybe. Late May brought the kind of heat that made the office AC struggle. Lucas's apartment didn't have AC at all, which meant sleeping was difficult, and Emma was cranky from the warmth. He bought a cheap fan at the store, set it up in her room, and promised himself that the first thing he did with his promotion salary increase was find them a better place. At work, they entered the final integration phase. All the pieces they'd been building separately, the redesigned inventory module, the fixed predictive model, the new integration layer, had to work together. In theory, they'd designed everything to interface correctly. In practice, integration always revealed surprises. The first integration test crashed within 15 minutes. "What happened?" Ava asked, staring at the error logs. "Memory leak in the integration layer," Marcus said, looking pale. "Under combined load from multiple modules, it's allocating memory faster than it releases it." "How did we miss this?" "Because we tested each module separately. The leak only manifests when they're all running simultaneously." Sarah was already diving into the code. "I see it. There's a reference cycle in the event handling system. Should be fixable in a couple days." "We don't have a couple days, Ava said. "Fix it today. Whatever it takes." Sarah fixed it in 6 hours, fueled by energy drinks and spite. They ran the integration test again. This time it ran for an hour before hitting a different error, a race condition in the database connection pooling that only triggered under high concurrency. Lucas felt a familiar sinking feeling. They'd spent months eliminating problems, and new ones kept appearing like Hydra heads. "This is normal, right?" Tyler asked nervously. "Finding bugs during integration? It's normal," Marcus assured him. "Annoying, but normal. This is why we test." They spent a week in bug-fixing hell. Each day brought new issues, some trivial, some serious, all requiring time they didn't have. The team worked late every night. Lucas saw Emma even less than before. His guilt about it grew in proportion to his exhaustion. On June 1st, exactly 1 month before the scheduled launch, they finally got a clean integration test. All modules running together, handling load, processing data correctly. No crashes, no corruption, no mysterious errors. "Don't celebrate yet," Ava warned when the team started to cheer. "We need a week of stable testing before I believe it's really fixed." But it held. Day after day of integration testing, throwing increasingly complex scenarios at the system, and it held. The architecture they'd rebuilt from scratch was working the way it was supposed to. "We might actually pull this off," Marcus said on June 7th, watching clean test results scroll past. "We're going to pull this off," Lucas corrected. "We've come too far to fail now." That night he made it home in time for dinner with Emma, actually unplugged from work, focused on her completely. They played a board game after eating. Her choice, some complicated thing about building cities that she explained with enthusiasm he hadn't seen in weeks. "You seem happier," she observed, moving her little plastic buildings around the board. "The work project is almost done," he said. "1 more month. And then you'll be less busy?" "Yeah, Bug. Then I'll be less busy." He meant it this time, or at least he hoped he did. The promise lasted exactly 3 days. On June 10th, Richard Cross called an emergency meeting that derailed Lucas's plan to leave early and take Emma out for ice cream. The client had requested a pre-launch security audit. Standard procedure, but it required documentation the team hadn't prepared yet because they'd been too focused on making the system actually work. "How long will this take?" Richard asked, looking at Ava and Lucas across the conference table. 2 weeks if we dedicate someone full-time to it," Ava said. "Maybe 10 days if we all pitch in. We have 3 weeks until launch. That's cutting it close." "It's doable," Lucas said, though his stomach tightened at the timeline. "We've got the system stable. This is just documentation and compliance verification." "Just?" Richard's eyebrow lifted. "Security audits have killed deals before. If they find vulnerabilities we missed..." "They won't," Lucas interrupted, then caught himself. "I mean, we've been security conscious throughout the rebuild. The architecture is sound. We just need to prove it on paper." Richard studied him for a moment. "All right, Make it happen. But I want updates twice a day. No surprises. Lucas texted Emma from the elevator. Sorry, Bug. Work thing came up. Ice cream this weekend? Her response came 5 minutes later. Okay. Just that. No heart emoji, no excitement, just acceptance that Dad was bailing again. The security documentation consumed the next week. Lucas coordinated with a compliance specialist Richard brought in, a man named David who'd worked in government cybersecurity and treated every question like a potential breach. Together, they documented data encryption protocols, access control matrices, authentication workflows, and about 40 other categories Lucas hadn't even considered. You're thorough, David observed on the third day, reviewing Lucas's documentation of the database security architecture. Most teams try to skip corners on this stuff. We tried that approach on the first version, Lucas said. Didn't end well. I heard about that. Diane Morris, right? She was always more about speed than substance. Lucas didn't comment. Diane had been gone for months, but her shadow still hung over the project, a reminder of what happened when you cut corners and hoped for the best. Sarah helped with the application layer security documentation, while Marcus handled the infrastructure components. Rebecca documented the data handling protocols for the predictive model. Even Tyler contributed, writing up the testing methodologies they'd used to validate system security under various attack scenarios. By June 17th, they had a complete security audit package ready for the client's review. David approved it with minimal revisions, which felt like winning a small lottery. This is solid work, he told Lucas as they finished the final review. Companies twice your size don't document this well. We had good motivation, Lucas said. $40 million tends to focus the mind. David laughed. That it does. The client's security team took 2 days to review the documentation. Lucas spent those 2 days refreshing his email every 10 minutes, running worst-case scenarios in his head, and generally driving himself crazy with anticipation. The approval came through on June 19th. Security documentation approved. Proceed to final UAT phase. UAT, user acceptance testing, the last hurdle before launch. The client would put the system through real-world scenarios, testing every feature against their requirements, looking for anything that didn't work as promised. This is it, Ava said in the team meeting where they reviewed the UAT plan. 2 weeks of testing, and if we pass, we launch July 5th as planned. What happens if we don't pass? Tyler asked. We fix whatever they find and retest, but that eats into our launch window, which means we risk missing the deadline entirely. She looked around the room. So we're going to pass. Questions? There weren't any. Everyone knew what was at stake. The client began UAT on June 21st, the summer solstice. Lucas thought there was something symbolic about that, the longest day of the year, the peak of light before the slow decline into darkness. He hoped it wasn't an omen. The first day of testing went smoothly. The client's team ran through basic workflows, creating inventory records, processing orders, generating simple forecasts. Everything worked as expected. Lucas allowed himself to breathe slightly easier. Day 2 brought the first issue. The predictive model crashed when the client tried to run a forecast using their actual historical data, not the sanitized test data Rebecca had used for training, but the messy, complicated reality of their business. What's different about their data? Ava asked in the emergency call Rebecca organized. It's got edge cases we didn't account for, Rebecca said, her screen sharing showing the crash logs. Null values in fields we assumed would always be populated. Date ranges that extend further back than our training set. Product categories that don't match our taxonomy. Can we fix it? Yes, but it's going to take a few days to make the model robust enough to handle all these variations. Lucas felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming. They'd spent months eliminating problems, and reality kept finding new ways to break their assumptions. How many days? He asked. 3? Maybe 4. I need to retrain with their actual data characteristics, update the validation logic, test against all their edge cases. We have 12 days until launch, Ava said quietly. I know, I'm sorry. I thought we'd covered all the scenarios. You thought wrong, Sarah said, not unkindly. We all did. Real data is always messier than test data. They told the client there was a compatibility issue that would take a few days to resolve. The client wasn't thrilled, but accepted it with the kind of weary patience that suggested they dealt with software problems before. Rebecca worked 70-hour days for the next 4 days. Lucas helped where he could, validating her fixes, testing edge cases, documenting the changes. By June 25th, the model was handling the client's data correctly. They resumed UAT. This time the predictive model worked, but the client found a different problem. The inventory reporting module was producing subtly wrong numbers under specific conditions. How wrong? Marcus asked when the client reported it. Wrong enough to matter. When we filter by multiple product categories simultaneously, the count is off by about 3%. 3% didn't sound like much until you multiplied it across millions of inventory items. Then it became a material discrepancy that could cost the client serious money. Sarah and Tyler dug into the reporting code, found a logic error in how the database query was handling multiple filter conditions. It was the kind of subtle bug that only manifested in complex scenarios, exactly the type of thing that could slip past testing. 2 days to fix and retest, Sarah estimated. They were now 9 days from launch. The margin for error had evaporated. Lucas worked until midnight that night, then again the next night. Emma left him a note on the kitchen table. You promised less busy. This still looks busy. Love, Emma. The note sat next to his laptop all day, a small accusation he couldn't answer. The reporting fix went in on June 27th. The client retested, confirmed it was working correctly, and moved on to the next set of scenarios. Lucas held his breath waiting for the next problem. It came on June 29th. The system performance degraded significantly when the client ran their monthly close process, a massive batch job that processed thousands of transactions simultaneously. We tested for load, Marcus said, staring at the performance metrics. We ran stress tests. How did we miss this? Because we didn't test the specific combination of their monthly close workflow with peak transaction volume at quarter end, Lucas said, reading the client's detailed problem report. It's a perfect storm of high load, complex processing, and resource contention we didn't anticipate. Can we optimize it? Lucas and Marcus spent the next 2 days buried in performance profiling. They found inefficient database queries, memory allocation patterns that caused garbage collection pauses, and connection pooling issues that created bottlenecks under extreme load. Each fix required careful testing to ensure it didn't break something else. Lucas felt like he was playing Jenga with code. Pull out one piece, hope the structure doesn't collapse. By July 1st, they'd improved the performance enough to handle the client's monthly close within acceptable time parameters. Barely acceptable, but acceptable. We're cutting this really close, Ava said in their daily status update with Richard. How close? Richard asked. Launch is in 4 days. We're still resolving UAT issues. If the client finds anything else major, we're in trouble. Define major. Anything that requires more than a day to fix. Richard was quiet on the video call, his expression unreadable. Keep me posted, and start preparing a contingency plan in case we need to delay. After the call ended, Lucas looked at Ava. There's no contingency plan, is there? If we delay again, the client walks. Probably. But Richard needs to feel like we have options. She rubbed her eyes. How are you holding up? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Lucas thought about Emma's note, about the promises he'd broken, about the exhaustion that had become his baseline state. I'm tired, he admitted, but we're almost there. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Is that supposed to be encouraging? No, it's supposed to be honest. She leaned back in her chair. You've done incredible work on this project, Lucas. Whatever happens with the launch, I want you to know that. If we fail, incredible work doesn't matter much. It matters to me, and it should matter to you. She paused. There's more to success than just hitting deadlines. Building something right, building it with integrity, that has value even if the timing doesn't work out perfectly. Lucas wanted to believe that, but he'd grown up in a world where results mattered more than intentions, where almost didn't pay the bills. I just want this to work, he said quietly. I know. Me too. July 2nd brought another UAT issue, this one in the user interface. The client's team found that certain workflow sequences caused the interface to freeze temporarily. Not a crash, just an unresponsive period of 10 to 15 seconds that made the system feel broken. It's a rendering issue, Tyler explained, showing the browser console logs. The UI is trying to update too many elements simultaneously when certain state changes occur. Can you fix it today? Lucas asked. Yeah, it's not complicated, just tedious. I need to optimize the component update logic. Tyler fixed it in 6 hours. The client retested, confirmed it was resolved, and, Lucas barely dared to hope, seemed to run out of issues to report. July 3rd arrived with no new problems. The client continued testing, running through scenario after scenario, and the system held. Lucas watched the test results come in throughout the day, each successful test feeling like a minor miracle. At 4 p.m., the client's project manager sent an email. UAT complete. All critical and high-priority scenarios passed. Recommend proceed to production deployment. The team erupted in subdued celebration, subdued because they were all too exhausted for anything more energetic. Sarah actually smiled, which Lucas had rarely seen. Marcus looked like he might cry from relief. Tyler fist-pumped weakly from his desk. Ava forwarded the email to Richard with a simple note. We're clear for launch. Well, Richard's response came within minutes. Deploy to production tomorrow morning, and congratulations. You earned this. Lucas left work at 6 p.m., the earliest he'd left in weeks. He picked up pizza on the way home, the good kind from Emma's favorite place, and found her doing homework at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen supervising. Pizza night? Emma asked, looking up with cautious hope. Pizza night, Lucas confirmed. And I'm actually going to eat it with you this time instead of getting called away. He turned off his phone, put it in a drawer, and gave Emma his complete attention for the evening. They ate pizza, watched a movie she'd been wanting to see, and talked about everything except work. For 3 hours, he wasn't senior analyst Lucas Hale. He was just dad. When he tucked her into bed, Emma hugged him tighter than usual. I'm glad you're here, she said. Me too, Bug. And tomorrow, after the work thing launches, I'm going to be here a lot more. Promise? He thought about all the promises he'd made and broken over the past 6 months. Thought about the cost of this project on her, on both of them. Promise, he said. Real promise this time. She seemed satisfied with that. Lucas left her room hoping he could actually keep it. He retrieved his phone from the drawer, found a message from Ava sent an hour earlier. Deploy starts at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Be there by 5:30. This is it. Lucas set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and tried to sleep. His mind wouldn't cooperate, running through deployment checklists and contingency plans. He finally dozed off around 1 a.m., woke up 3 hours later feeling like he hadn't slept at all. The office was quiet when he arrived at 5:20 a.m. Ava was already there, along with Marcus and Sarah. The deployment team from IT operations was setting up in the main conference room. 3 technicians who would handle the actual production cutover. Nervous? Sarah asked Lucas as they waited for the 6 a.m. start time. Terrified, he admitted. Good. Means you care. She pulled up the deployment checklist on her laptop. We've planned for everything that could go wrong. If something we didn't plan for happens, we improvise. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. I know, but it's true. At 6 a.m. precisely, the deployment began. The IT team started migrating data from the old system to the new one, a process that would take approximately 4 hours. During that time, the client's users would be locked out, a planned downtime window they'd agreed to months ago. Lucas watched the progress bars crawl across the screens, each percentage point feeling like it took forever. 7%, 12%, 21%. At 7:15, the first warning appeared. Data validation error in inventory module. Approximately 200 records flagged for review. What kind of validation error? Marcus asked, suddenly alert. The IT lead pulled up the details. Legacy data format inconsistencies. Records that don't match the new schema constraints. Can we transform them automatically? Sarah asked. Some of them. Others need manual review to determine correct values. Lucas felt his stomach drop. They'd tested data migration extensively, but apparently not extensively enough. How long for manual review? Ava asked, her voice carefully neutral. Hard to say. Could be an hour, could be 3 hours, depending on how many records need human judgment calls. They didn't have 3 hours. The The client expected the system online by 11 a.m. Split the work, Lucas said. Sarah, Marcus, and I will each take a third of the flagged records. Make the calls as fast as we can while maintaining data integrity. They worked frantically, reviewing records, making decisions about how to transform old data formats into new ones, documenting their choices for the client's review later. Some decisions were obvious. Others required educated guesses based on business logic and pattern recognition. By 9:30, they'd cleared all 200 records. The migration resumed, 43%, 58%, 71%. At 10:15, another error. Integration test failed. Connection timeout to external validation service. This one wasn't their fault. The client's external validation service was experiencing issues on their end, but it still blocked the deployment from completing. Can we proceed without it? The IT lead asked. No, Marcus said. That service validates critical transactions. We can't go live without it functioning. Ava called the client's technical contact, explained the situation. There was a tense 15-minute wait while they investigated their service issue. Lucas paced the conference room, watching the clock tick toward 11 a.m., then passed it. At 10:40, the client called back. Their service was operational again. The integration test passed. Resume deployment, the IT lead said. 86%, 92%, 98%. At 11:17 a.m. on July 4th, 17 minutes late, but still within the extended maintenance window, the client had grudgingly approved. The deployment completed. System is live, the IT lead announced, monitoring for any immediate issues. Everyone stared at the monitoring dashboards, watching metrics stream in. Response times, error rates, active users, database connections. All the numbers that would tell them whether 6 months of work had actually produced something functional.
The numbers looked good, better than good. They looked perfect. We did it, Tyler said, sounding amazed. Don't celebrate yet, Sarah cautioned. First hour is critical. Lots of ways things can still break. But they didn't break. Users logged in, started processing transactions, running reports, using the predictive model. The system handled the load smoothly, responding quickly, producing correct results. 30 minutes passed. An hour, 2 hours. At 1 p.m., Richard Cross walked into the conference room carrying a bottle of champagne. I think we can call this a success, he said, setting the bottle on the table. The client just called. Their team is thrilled with the system performance. Well done, all of you. Someone found paper cups. Richard poured champagne for everyone who wanted it, orange juice for Tyler, who was only 22 and apparently took the company alcohol policy seriously. To the team that proved it could be done right, Richard said, raising his cup. They drank. Lucas felt the exhaustion of the past 6 months settle into his bones, now that the adrenaline was finally fading. Ava pulled him aside while the others celebrated. You should be proud, she said quietly. This was your integrity that started all of this. Your refusal to accept broken systems and convenient lies. It was your leadership that made it happen, Lucas countered. I just pointed out the problems. You did more than that. You showed everyone in this company what it looks like to care about doing things right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She paused. Richard wants to meet with both of us Monday morning. I think there might be another promotion in your future. Lucas thought about Emma, about the promises he'd made, about what another promotion would mean for his time and energy. Can I think about it? Ava looked surprised. Most people don't need to think about promotions. I'm not most people. I've got responsibilities outside this office. Fair enough. We'll talk Monday. Lucas left at 3 p.m., picked up Emma early from her summer day camp, and took her to the park. They got ice cream, the celebratory ice cream he'd promised weeks ago and kept postponing. They sat on a bench watching other kids play, just being together without any agenda or time pressure. Did your big work thing finish? Emma asked, chocolate ice cream on her nose. Yeah, Bug. It finished? Successfully. So you'll be less busy now? I'll be less busy now. For real this time? He wiped the chocolate off her nose with a napkin. For real this time. She studied him with her serious 8-year-old eyes, judging whether to believe him. Lucas held her gaze, meaning every word. Okay, she said finally. Good.
They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence. Lucas's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably work emails, status updates, the usual flood of communication. He ignored it. Whatever came next could wait until Monday. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt foreign after 6 months of chaos. Lucas took Emma to the movies Saturday. Her choice. Some animated thing about a robot learning to feel emotions. He watched her laugh at the jokes, completely absorbed in the story, and realized how much he'd missed just being present with her. Sunday they went to the park again, kicked a soccer ball around until they were both sweating and breathless. Emma was terrible at soccer, but enthusiastic, which counted for more. They got burgers afterward from the place down the street, sat on the apartment steps eating while the summer evening cooled around them. "This was a good weekend," Emma said, ketchup on her chin. "Yeah, Bug. It was. Can we have more weekends like this?" Lucas thought about Monday's meeting with Richard Cross, about Ava's hint of another promotion, about the choice he'd been avoiding. "We can try," he said. Monday morning arrived with the weight of decisions unmade. Lucas dropped Emma at summer camp, caught the bus downtown, and arrived at Sterling and Cross with the kind of nervous energy that came from not knowing what came next. The office felt different. People smiled at him in the hallways, offered congratulations he hadn't expected. Word had spread about Meridian's successful launch, and apparently Lucas was part of the success story now, instead of the guy who nearly got fired for causing problems. "Lucas Hale, the man who saved Meridian," someone called out as he walked past the coffee station. He didn't correct them, didn't say it was a team effort or deflect the praise the way he might have 6 months ago, just nodded and kept walking. Ava was waiting in her office when he arrived at 8:30. "Ready for this?" she asked. "No idea what this is, so probably not. Richard wants to offer you Director of Technical Quality. New position, reporting directly to him. Substantial raise, company equity, the works." Lucas sat down slowly. "Director. You'd oversee quality standards across all projects. Make sure we don't end up with another Diane situation. Someone building broken systems because no one's checking the work. That's a big job. You've been doing parts of it already, just formalizing the role and giving you the authority to actually enforce standards." She paused. "But there's a catch." Of course there was. The role requires significant travel, client sites, partner meetings, industry conferences. Richard estimates 30 to 40% of your time on the road. Lucas thought about Emma, about Mrs. Chen's extended hours that had already pushed their arrangement to the limit, about promises made on park benches. "How much time do I have to decide?" he asked. "Richard wants an answer by end of week." "But Lucas," Ava leaned forward, "this is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. Director level at your age, with your background? That's unheard of." "I know. So what's the hesitation?" He could have given her the corporate answer, the one about needing to review the full job description and compensation package. Instead, he gave her the truth. "I have an 8-year-old daughter who's already spent 6 months barely seeing me. I promised her things would get better after Meridian launched. Taking a job that puts me on the road 40% of the time breaks that promise." Ava was quiet for a moment. "What if we could structure it differently? Less travel, more remote oversight? Would Richard go for that?" "I don't know, but I could ask." She studied him. "You're actually considering turning this down, aren't you?" "I'm considering what matters more, the job or the life. Most people would say you can have both. Most people don't have full custody of an 8-year-old and no backup plan when work gets crazy." Lucas stood. "I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I need to think about what yes actually means." The meeting with Richard Cross was scheduled for 10 a.m. Lucas spent the intervening hour at his desk, staring at spreadsheets he wasn't really reading, weighing options that all had downsides. At 9:50, his phone rang. "Unknown number. Lucas Hale," he answered. "Mr. Hale, this is Patricia Chen from Westfield Academy. I'm calling about your daughter, Emma." His stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's fine physically, but there was an incident at camp this morning. Emma got into an altercation with another child. We need you to come pick her up." "What kind of altercation?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person. How soon can you be here?" Lucas looked at the clock. 9:52. His meeting with Richard was in 8 minutes. "I'm on my way," he said. He grabbed his bag, headed for Ava's office. She was on a call but waved him in when she saw his expression. "I have to go," he said quietly. "Emma's camp called. There was an incident." Ava covered her phone mic. "The meeting with Richard, I know, tell him I'm sorry, family emergency." He didn't wait for her response, took the elevator down, caught a cab instead of the bus because time mattered, and made it to Westfield Academy in 23 minutes. Patricia Chen was waiting in the office, no relation to Mrs. Chen, despite the shared last name. She was younger than Lucas expected, with kind eyes that didn't quite match the serious expression she wore. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming so quickly." She gestured to a small conference room. "Emma's in the quiet room with one of our counselors. She's not in trouble, but we do need to talk." They sat. Through the window, Lucas could see Emma in another room, hunched in a chair looking smaller than usual. "What happened?" he asked. According to the other children, Emma was playing soccer during free time when one of the boys made a comment about her not having a mother. Emma responded by pushing him down and yelling at him. Patricia paused. The other child wasn't hurt, but Emma's reaction was concerning. This isn't typical behavior for her. Lucas closed his eyes. He'd been so focused on work, on proving himself, on building something that mattered, that he'd missed what was happening with his daughter. "She's been having a hard time lately," he said quietly. "I've been working a lot, long hours, a big project. I thought—" He stopped. What had he thought? That she was fine because she said she was fine? That an 8-year-old could just handle her father being absent for 6 months? "Mr. Hale, I'm not judging your parenting. Single parenthood is incredibly difficult. But Emma's teachers have noticed changes over the past few months. She's been withdrawn, her grades have slipped slightly, and now this outburst." Patricia's voice was gentle. "I think she might benefit from talking to someone. We have a counselor who specializes in helping children process difficult emotions." "You think she needs therapy. I think she needs support. And maybe you both do." Lucas thought about the promotion, about Director of Technical Quality, about building a career that would give Emma the life he'd never had. Thought about the cost of that ambition on the person it was supposed to benefit. "Can I talk to her?" he asked. "Of course." Emma looked up when Lucas entered the quiet room. Her eyes were red from crying, her expression a mixture of defiance and shame. "Hey, Bug," he said, sitting in the small chair next to hers. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I know I shouldn't have pushed him, but he said—" Her voice broke. "He said I probably don't have a mom because even she didn't want to be around me." Lucas felt anger flash hot in his chest, anger at the other kid, at the cruelty children could inflict on each other. But beneath that was a deeper realization. Emma had been carrying this pain for years, and he'd been too busy building systems to notice. "That kid is wrong," Lucas said firmly, "and mean. What happened with your mom had nothing to do with you. She left because she wasn't ready to be a parent. That's on her, not you. But why does everyone else have normal families and we don't?" "Because normal is different for everyone, Bug. Our family is you and me. That's our normal. And yeah, sometimes it's hard, but it doesn't make us less than families that look different." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just wanted him to stop talking. I know, but pushing people isn't how we handle things, even when they're being jerks. Are you mad at me?" Lucas pulled her into a hug. "No, I'm sad you were hurting and I didn't see it. That's on me." They sat there for a moment, Emma's small frame pressed against him. Lucas felt the weight of every choice he'd made over the past 6 months, every late night and broken promise and moment of absence. "Ms. Chen thinks maybe you should talk to someone," he said quietly. "A counselor who helps kids work through tough feelings." "Like a therapist?" "Yeah. What do you think about that?" Emma was quiet, considering. "Would you come too? If you want me to." "Okay, then okay." They left the academy together. Lucas signed the incident report, agreed to the counseling recommendation, and walked Emma to the car in silence. His phone had been buzzing in his pocket for the past 30 minutes. Probably Ava, probably Richard, probably the meeting he'd missed and the opportunity slipping away. He didn't check it. Where are we going? Emma asked as he started driving. Home. You're taking the day off, and so am I. Won't you get in trouble at work? Maybe, but you're more important than work. She looked at him with those serious eyes that saw too much. You always say that, but you're always at work. The truth of it hit harder than any criticism from Diane or Connor ever had. You're right, he said. I've been saying one thing and doing another. That's going to change. How? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. They spent the afternoon at home. No work, no emails, no deadlines. Just Lucas and Emma playing board games and talking about things they hadn't made time for in months. She told him about the girls at camp who'd become her friends, about the book series she was reading, about her worries that fourth grade would be harder than third. He listened, really listened, without his mind wandering to code architecture or project timelines. At 4 p.m., his phone rang. Ava, I should probably take this, he told Emma. Okay. He stepped into his bedroom, answered the call. Lucas, where are you? Ava's voice was tight with stress. Home. Emma needed me. Richard was not happy about you missing the meeting. He thinks you're not serious about the director role. Maybe I'm not. Silence on the other end. Then, what does that mean? It means I'm not sure I want a job that requires me to choose between my career and my daughter. I've spent 6 months making that choice wrong. I'm not doing it for the rest of her childhood. Lucas, this is a huge opportunity. I know what it is. I also know what it costs. He sat on the edge of his bed, suddenly exhausted. Emma got into a fight at camp today because a kid made fun of her for not having a mom. And I didn't even know she was struggling with that because I've been too busy proving I belong at Sterling and Cross. Ava was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. That's rough. Yeah, it is. Lucas rubbed his face. I'm not saying I'm quitting or turning down every opportunity, but I need to think about what success actually looks like. And right now, it doesn't look like being on the road 40% of the time. What if we restructured the role, keep you local, minimize travel, focus on setting standards and reviewing processes rather than on-site oversight? Would Richard agree to that? I think I can convince him. You proved your value with Meridian. That buys you leverage to negotiate terms. Lucas thought about it. A role that let him influence quality across the company without sacrificing time with Emma. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the alternatives. Set up another meeting, he said. But this time, I'm coming with my own requirements. Fair enough. I'll talk to Richard tomorrow, see if he's willing to negotiate. After the call ended, Lucas found Emma in the living room, building an elaborate castle out of couch cushions. Is work mad at you? She asked without looking up. A little, but we're going to work it out. Are you going to get fired? I don't think so, but if I did, we'd be okay. She glanced at him, testing the truth of that statement. Would we really? Yeah, Bug. We'd really be okay. He sat on the floor next to her cushion castle. I've been thinking, maybe it's time we looked for a bigger apartment. Somewhere with a real bedroom for you. Maybe a small office for me. What do you think? Emma's face lit up. Really? Could I have my own desk for homework? Sure. We could even paint the walls, whatever color you want. Can we afford that? It was the kind of question an 8-year-old shouldn't have to ask, but Emma had learned early to think about money in ways other kids didn't. With the promotion, if I take it, yeah, we can afford it, even if the terms are different than what they first offered. What if you don't take it? Then we stay here a while longer and save up. Either way, we're good. She seemed satisfied with that. They spent the rest of the evening planning her imaginary room. Purple walls, she decided, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The next morning, Lucas returned to work braced for fallout. Instead, he found a meeting request from Richard Cross. Wednesday, 10 a.m., discussion of modified director role. Ava had worked fast. Lucas spent Tuesday preparing. Not preparing a presentation or a pitch, but preparing to be honest about what he needed. He made a list of non-negotiables: minimal travel, predictable hours, flexibility for family emergencies. Things that would have seemed laughable to ask for 4 months ago, but felt essential now. Wednesday's meeting included Richard, Ava, and someone from HR Lucas didn't know. He laid out his requirements clearly, without apology. I want the director role, he said, but I need it structured in a way that doesn't require me to choose between being a good employee and being a good father. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Lucas with an expression that gave nothing away. Most people in your position would just take what's offered, Richard said. I'm not most people, and I think you know that by now. I do. Richard glanced at Ava, then back to Lucas. Here's what I'm willing to do. Director of Technical Quality based in this office, no more than 10% travel annually. You set the quality standards, review critical projects, build the frameworks. Other people handle the on-site implementation. Salary and equity as originally discussed, but with the understanding that refusing travel requests isn't an option for the 10% we do require. It was better than Lucas had hoped for. What about flexibility for family situations? He asked. Within reason. I'm not running a daycare, but I also understand that life happens. As long as the work gets done and you're communicating proactively, we can work with family needs. And if I need to leave for an emergency like Monday, then you leave. But you communicate with your team so they're not left hanging. Richard's expression softened slightly. Lucas, I'm a father too. I get it. Build a life that works. And you'll do better work than if you're constantly stressed about what you're missing at home. Lucas looked at Ava, who nodded encouragingly, then at the HR representative, who was already pulling up paperwork. Then I accept, Lucas said. They shook hands. Richard left for his next meeting. Ava stayed behind as the HR person explained benefits and start dates and the administrative details of a promotion. When they were finally alone, Ava smiled. You did good, she said, standing up for what you needed instead of just accepting what was offered. Learned that from you, the whole standing up for things. Did you, though? Because I seem to remember you standing up to Diane long before I gave you permission. Fair point. She walked to her window, looked out at the city. I have some news, too. Richard's promoting me to VP of Technology Operations. Broader scope, more responsibility, and, she turned to face him, you'll be one of my direct reports in the new structure. Congratulations, you earned it. We both did. The Meridian rebuild wasn't just about fixing a broken system, it was about proving a different way of working was possible. She paused. Think we can keep that going? I'm willing to try. Lucas started his new role the following Monday. The transition was smoother than he expected. He already knew most of the projects that needed quality oversight, already had relationships with the key teams. What changed was the authority to actually enforce standards without having to convince someone above him to care. He implemented mandatory architecture reviews for all new projects, established clear documentation requirements, created a framework for identifying and escalating technical risks before they became crises. The things he'd wished existed when he first joined Meridian. Some people pushed back, called him overly cautious, said he was slowing down development with unnecessary process. Lucas listened to the complaints, adjusted what made sense to adjust, and held firm on the things that mattered. 3 months into the new role, a project lead named Jennifer came to him with concerns about a system her team was building. The architecture had flaws she'd flagged to her manager, who dismissed them as theoretical problems. Sounds familiar, Lucas said. Show me what you've got. They spent 2 hours reviewing her documentation. The problems were real, not as severe as Meridian's had been, but serious enough to cause issues in production. What do I do? Jennifer asked. My manager thinks I'm overreacting. You escalate. That's what the process is for. Lucas pulled up the quality framework. Document everything you've found, submit it through the formal review channel. I'll evaluate it, and if it's as serious as you think, we halt development until it's fixed. Won't that make my manager mad? Probably, but that's not your problem. Your job is to identify risks. My job is to make sure they get addressed. He met her eyes. And I promise you won't get punished for raising legitimate concerns. That's the whole point of having this role. Jennifer submitted her findings. Lucas reviewed them, agreed they were serious, and halted the project despite her manager's protests. They spent 3 weeks redesigning the architecture properly, then resumed development. The project launched successfully 4 months later. Jennifer's manager grudgingly admitted the delay had been necessary.
You're making enemies, Ava warned Lucas over coffee one morning. Project leads who think you're blocking their progress. Good. Maybe they'll start designing things right the first time instead of assuming they can patch problems later. Just be careful. Not everyone appreciates having their work questioned. Not everyone should be building critical systems if they can't handle scrutiny. Ava laughed. Same old Lucas, no political filter. I'm working on it, but some battles are worth fighting. Life settled into a rhythm that actually felt sustainable. Lucas worked hard but left at reasonable hours most days. Made it to Emma's soccer games even though she was still terrible at soccer. Had dinner with her most nights, helped with homework, was present in ways he hadn't been during the Meridian rebuild. They moved to a bigger apartment in September, 2 bedrooms, enough space for Emma to have her purple-walled room with glow-in-the-dark stars. She decorated it with drawings and photos and the kind of enthusiasm that made the higher rent worth every penny. It's perfect, she declared after they'd finished unpacking. Yeah, Bug, it is. One evening in October, Lucas was reviewing a project proposal when Emma appeared in his doorway. Dad? Yeah? Remember when you said success isn't just about work? He closed his laptop, gave her his full attention. I remember. I think you were right, because this... She gestured around the apartment, at the life they'd built. This feels like success, even if it's not fancy. Lucas felt something warm settle in his chest. Come here. She crossed the room, let him pull her into a hug. You know what I learned this year? He said. What? That the most important thing I could build wasn't a computer system. It was a life you felt safe in, a home where you knew you mattered more than any job. Sappy, Emma said, but she was smiling. Yeah, but true. She pulled back, looked at him with those serious eyes. I'm proud of you, for what you did at work, but also for being here. I'm proud of you too, for being patient with me while I figured things out. They ordered pizza that night, still from the good place, and watched a movie together. Lucas's phone buzzed once with a work email, and he ignored it. Whatever it was could wait until tomorrow. In November, Sterling and Cross held its annual leadership summit. Lucas was invited for the first time, part of the director-level cohort that shaped company strategy. He almost didn't go. It was a Thursday and Friday event, which meant missing Emma's school play. Then he remembered Richard's words about communicating and finding balance. He talked to Emma's teacher, arranged for Mrs. Chen to record the play on her phone, and attended the summit. During one of the panel discussions on innovation and risk management, someone asked Lucas about the Meridian rebuild. What was the key to turning that project around, Bastel? They asked. Lucas thought about Diane dismissing his concerns, about Connor's hostility, about the months of nearly getting fired for refusing to ignore problems. Caring more about being right than being liked, he said finally, and having the courage to fight for that even when it's uncomfortable. After the session, several people approached him, wanted to know how he'd gotten leadership to listen, how he'd built credibility without a traditional background, how he'd navigated the politics. I didn't navigate the politics, Lucas admitted. I mostly crashed through them, which almost got me fired multiple times. But I had people, Ava, the audit team, eventually Richard, who were willing to listen to evidence even when it was inconvenient. He paused. And I was willing to lose my job over doing the right thing. That kind of commitment is hard to ignore. One of the other directors, a woman named Patricia, stayed after the others had drifted away. I have a situation on my project, she said quietly. Similar to what you dealt with on Meridian. Problems the team lead doesn't want to acknowledge. I've been trying to find a political way to address it, but I'm running out of time. Stop looking for the political way, Lucas said. Document the problems, escalate through proper channels, and let the evidence speak for itself. That's what the quality framework exists for. Even if it makes people angry? Especially if it makes people angry. Angry is better than failed. Patricia nodded slowly. I needed to hear that. Thank you. She submitted her concerns the following Monday. Lucas reviewed them, found them valid, and halted her project for an architecture redesign. Patricia's team lead was furious, but the project eventually launched successfully with a stronger foundation. You're changing the culture, Ava told Lucas afterward. People are starting to see that raising concerns early is rewarded, not punished.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's both. Good because we'll build better systems. Bad because some of the old guard who built their careers on cutting corners are getting exposed. She smiled slightly. But I think good outweighs bad. December brought the holidays and a reflection Lucas hadn't expected. Sterling and Cross published its year-end report, highlighting successful projects and innovations. Meridian was featured prominently, the system that had nearly failed but became a model for how to rebuild properly. Lucas's name was mentioned, so was Ava's, and the whole team's. But there was also a broader acknowledgement of the cultural shift toward quality and transparency. Richard called Lucas into his office the week before Christmas. "You've had quite a year," Richard said, gesturing for Lucas to sit. "That's one way to put it. I wanted to tell you something. When Ava first recommended you for that junior analyst position, I almost said no. Single father, no degree, unconventional background. I thought it was a diversity hire that would cause more problems than it solved." Richard's expression was unreadable. "I was wrong. You didn't just identify problems with Meridian. You showed this entire company what integrity looks like in practice. I just did what needed doing. Most people don't. They see problems and stay quiet because it's safer. You saw problems and risked everything to make sure they got fixed." Richard leaned forward. "I want you to know that the director role is just the beginning. You keep doing what you're doing, and there's no limit to how far you can go here." Lucas thought about Emma, about the boundaries he'd drawn, about the life he'd built that didn't revolve entirely around work. "I appreciate that," he said, "but I'm not trying to go anywhere in particular. I'm just trying to do good work and be a good father. If that leads somewhere, great. If not, I'm okay with that too." Richard studied him. "You really mean that?" "I do. That's rare and valuable." Richard stood, extended his hand. "Merry Christmas, Lucas. Enjoy your time with Emma." Lucas spent Christmas week entirely unplugged. No laptop, no work email, no checking in on projects. Just him and Emma, decorating their new apartment, baking cookies that came out slightly burned, watching holiday movies until they could recite the dialogue. Emma had asked for art supplies for Christmas. Nothing specific, just whatever he thought would help her get better at drawing. Lucas bought her a whole set: sketchbooks, colored pencils, watercolors, the works. She opened the box Christmas morning and actually teared up. "This is too much," she said. "It's exactly right." She spent the rest of the day drawing, filling page after page with houses and trees and figures that were recognizable if you squinted. Lucas watched her work with the kind of focused concentration she'd inherited from him and felt proud of the person she was becoming. On New Year's Eve, they made a tradition of it, staying up until midnight, making wishes for the year ahead. "I wish for Dad to keep being less busy," Emma said at 11:59. "I wish for Emma to know she's the most important thing in my life," Lucas said. They counted down the final seconds together, watched fireworks from their apartment window, and Lucas felt something settle inside him. Contentment, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd finally gotten his priorities right. Work resumed in January with new projects and familiar challenges. Lucas reviewed architectures, flagged risks, pushed back on shortcuts. Some project leads appreciated his oversight. Others resented it. He'd learned to live with both. One afternoon in late January, almost exactly a year after he'd been hired, Lucas was reviewing a complex integration proposal when Ava appeared at his door. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Sure." She sat across from him, and there was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. "I need your honest opinion on something," she said. "Richard wants to know if you'd be interested in VP of Technology Quality. New role, broader scope, significant increase in responsibility and compensation." Lucas set down his pen. "What's the catch?" "No catch?" "Well, maybe 10% more travel than your current role, but still manageable. You'd oversee quality across all technology divisions, set enterprise standards, report directly to the CTO." She paused. "It's a big job, but I think you're ready for it." "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever lets you keep being the person who stands up for doing things right, whether that's as director or VP or something else entirely." Ava smiled. "You changed this company, Lucas. You proved that integrity isn't a liability, it's an asset. The question is whether you want to keep pushing that change at a larger scale. Lucas thought about it. Thought about Emma and the boundaries he'd drawn and the life they'd built. Thought about the project still getting built on shaky foundations, the shortcuts still being taken, the problems still being ignored. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, but Lucas, whatever you decide, I want you to know something. She stood. When I hired you, I saw someone smart who'd been overlooked. What I didn't see was someone who'd make me better at my job, who challenged me to stick to my principles even when it was hard. Thank you for that. After she left, Lucas sat with the decision. VP of Technology Quality, a role that could influence the entire company's approach to building systems, a chance to prevent other meridians before they started, but also more responsibility, more pressure, more risk of sliding back into the pattern of work consuming everything. He pulled out his phone, texted Emma. Big decision at work. Want to talk about it over pizza tonight? Her response came immediately. The good pizza place. Obviously. Then yes. They talked it through over pepperoni and mushroom, Emma asking surprisingly astute questions for a 9-year-old. Would you have to travel more? She asked. A little. Maybe 1 trip a month instead of 1 every 3 months. Could I come sometimes? Like if it's somewhere cool? Lucas hadn't considered that. Maybe. If the timing works and it's somewhere interesting. And would you be happy doing it? That was the real question. Would he be happy, or would he be chasing achievement for its own sake? I think I would, he said slowly, because it's not about the title. It's about making sure other people don't have to fight the same battles I did. Making it normal to care about quality instead of weird. Emma nodded seriously. Then you should do it. Yeah? Yeah. As long as you promise to still be here for the important stuff. Always, Bug. That's non-negotiable. Lucas accepted the VP role in February. The promotion came with challenges he expected. More meetings, more politics, more people who resented his standards. But it also came with the authority to actually change how Sterling and Cross built technology. He implemented quality gates that prevented projects from advancing without proper architecture review. Created incentives for teams that caught problems early rather than patching them later. Built mentorship programs to teach junior developers the skills he'd learned the hard way. Not everyone loved it. Some left for companies with lower standards. Others adapted, learned to see quality as an asset rather than an obstacle. The company changed, slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. Fewer critical failures. Better client satisfaction. A reputation for delivering systems that actually worked as promised. And Lucas changed too. Learned to balance ambition with presence, achievement with peace. Learned that success wasn't about reaching some imaginary pinnacle. It was about building a life that felt right when you were living it, not just when you were looking back on it. One Saturday in April, Emma had a soccer game that went into overtime. Her team was terrible, as always, but fighting hard. In the final minutes, Emma got the ball, dribbled past 2 defenders through sheer determination, if not skill, and kicked it toward the goal. The ball went wide by about 3 feet. Her team lost anyway. But Emma was grinning as she came off the field, sweaty and happy. Did you see that? She asked Lucas. I almost scored. I saw it, Bug. That was amazing. They got ice cream after, because effort deserved celebration even without victory. Sat on a bench in the spring sunshine, not talking about work or school or anything important, just being together. Lucas's phone buzzed. A work email, probably something urgent that someone thought required immediate attention. He glanced at it, then put the phone away. Not answering, Emma asked, ice cream dripping down her hand. It can wait, Lucas said. This is more important. She smiled at him, that gap-toothed smile that made everything else fade into background noise. And Lucas knew with absolute certainty he'd made the right choices. Not perfect choices. There was no such thing. But choices he could live with. Choices that let him look his daughter in the eye and know he'd shown up when it mattered. Because in the end, that was what success really looked like. Not corner offices or VP titles or systems that worked flawlessly. Those things mattered, but they weren't the foundation. The foundation was this: a kid who knew her father would be there. A job that valued integrity over expedience. A life built on principles that didn't crumble under pressure. Lucas Hale had started as the man everyone overlooked. No degree, no pedigree, no obvious path to success. He'd become the man who proved that caring about doing things right wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. That standing up for what mattered, even when it was hard, even when it cost something, was the only way to build anything that lasted. And in the quiet moments between the achievements and the challenges, sitting on a park bench with his daughter eating ice cream on a Saturday afternoon, he'd become something even more important. He'd become someone who knew what actually mattered and had the courage to live accordingly. That was the real victory. Everything else was just details.